Hi, I'm Mark Hawkins. I'm here with Randy Lindsay. This is sort of the second installment on our YouTube channel. We had the first was with Randy also as the premiere. The channel is your mission in life, and we talked about in the first installment. We talked about how Randy is an author and some of the different kinds of books that he's written. He's also been a president of the American Night Writers Association. He's had both traditionally published books and also non-traditional. What are the book that we're going to be talking about today is Hellathon, and it's the author is listed as Bennett Lodge. Why is it that you used a pen name on this one?
Yeah, most of my stuff is very family friendly. So pretty much, other than Hellathon, any other book that I write, you can hand over to a 10-year-old, and there's not going to be content in there that's objectionable. And I did not want any of my fans to say, "Oh, Randy's got another book out," and they buy it as a gift for their nephew or what grandson or whatever, and then find out that I kill a lot of people in this book. A lot of people.
I noticed that.
I mean, it does take place in hell, and you do have to have world building and mood building, and that does require some details that are, a little higher than what I would want a young person to read, 10 or 12.
Well, one of the things that I'm fascinated by is the afterlife. And I also wrote a novel about the afterlife. It's called Die Today. And so I have familiarity with the subject. And I loved your book when I read it. And it is a great example of a lot of different types of things related to our knowledge of the afterlife. And I sort of want to go through those with you. What are some of the other... But before we get to that, what are some of the other series that you've written? Any other books that are...
So as we talked in the premiere episode of your podcast, I did a memoir called The Milkman's Son. I am working on another memoir, but that's, for a different time. I have written a series of books called the Battlemental series, and that is for younger people, and it takes place in a world that I made up where the elements influence people, the elemental plane, so fire and water and everything. And there's a place where these creatures have been created based on the elements. So I have 2 books in that series. Then I have The Gathering, which is about the events leading up to the end of the world.
All right. Have you ever heard of a series called... I think it's a series that's popular among Christians about the end of the last times. Before
The Left Behind.
The Left Behind series. Yeah, that's the one. I'm glad you remembered that. It was missing in my data. So Left Behind is a series that is built around the concept of the rapture. And the rapture refers to people who are living the way they're supposed to as Christians being caught up to meet Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And there's a space of time. The key point of the concept of the series is that there's a space of time between the time they're caught up and when all of the other events of the end of the world are supposed to happen, when Christ is supposed to come, when the earth could be burned. All of that kind of stuff isn't really the focus of the series, because that sort of puts an end to things that they're filming on earth. But in that series, I really thought that was a great comparison between The Gathering and the Left Behind series. I could tell you the difference, just so people know. The Left Behind series is written from a standpoint of evangelical Christians, and it talks about the rapture as I've described. The Gathering is actually based around the culture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Is that a fair statement?
That is right on. Yeah.
And because of that, the gathering talks about, it doesn't talk about a rapture, it talks about the events of how things could go wrong if the United States stopped being a free country.
Yes.
That's a big deal. And if you think that through, it's not about zombies. It's not about some of this, to me, zombies and aliens are kind of crazy stuff. And we'll talk about them, on the channel. But the stuff that I really believe in, I do believe that there's potential really bad things that could happen between now and the second coming of Jesus Christ.
If I can jump in here for just a moment. So I've had several fans tell me that my book is scary. And I didn't write it as a horror, right? And they're like, what bothers me about it, as opposed to zombies, right? These are things that really could happen.
Yes.
They could happen to your average family. And that's what I wanted. So the main characters are an average Latter-day Saint family. And how do they respond to the situation? My original reason for writing the series was I'd like people that when we encounter these things, if they've read my book, they're like, oh, we can get through it. We can get through this and it will be okay.
Well, the reason I compare the gathering and Hellathon is because these are aspects of writing that I'm very interested in. One of them is relating to the final events before the end of the world, and the other is the afterlife, and they're very closely related. Hellathon is a book that's setting a worldview that I find fascinating for a couple of reasons. I'm going to compare it a minute to Dante's Inferno.
Okay.
One of the best books that you could ever read, if you like reading classics, and if you don't, you should, is Dante's Inferno. That book has had, written in 1300 and some by Dante, and it has had enormous impact on the way the world thinks about heaven and hell. And we compare it to Hellathon. One of the things that happens in Dante's Inferno is that people are being tortured in a physical way.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not just, how do you take a dead person and boil them in oil? Well, their body's in a box 6 feet underground, so they're not going to get boiled in oil. That's the worldview that Dante established as the backdrop of people still having some kind of physicality so that they could literally be tortured and punished. Is that something, a part of the worldview of your book?
Oh, yeah. So I do not deal with spirits. I'm trying to think if there's any character that is not a physical character, and I can't think of one. I'm forgetting one. I mean, it was a long time ago that I wrote the book. But, right, so wherever they end up, they have a physical body of some sort.
And so the people the subjects, your book is essentially taking place in hell, and everybody in hell is bad. Is that a fair way to... That's a fair observation.
Pretty much. They have committed a sin. Now, I will say this, and I kind of base it on a lot of the Catholic beliefs, and nothing against the Catholic Church. I have tons and tons of friends who are Catholic. But they have if you think of, oh my gosh, what is the one where he's, I can't think of his name. You do a certain thing, you're doomed to hell forever, right?
Yes. The part of the issue is you go to hell, can you be redeemed? And in Die Today, in my book about the afterlife, one of the things I do is I write about a man who has an affair, commits adultery, he's betrayed his wife and his 2 young children, and then he gets hit in a car wreck and dies, a quarter of the way into the book. And then the question is, he goes to hell, and can he be redeemed from hell? That was the essential, you want to have a plot, you want to have a problem. My original thought on that was, can you be redeemed from hell? Well, does your character I don't know if it would be a plot spoiler. Does your character have a chance to get redeemed from hell?
Now, let me give the pitch for this, the elevator pitch. So every 1,000 years, hell has a foot race to the gates of heaven, and the winner gains a second chance at life. So yes, the premise, when I'm pitching the story to people, that is the premise, is he has a chance for redemption.
Yes. Okay. And that's a wonderful thing. I like that idea. Your readers are going to like it because it's a hopeful kind of thing. And it also gives kind of an overarching purpose and plot to your book, which is something that Dante's Inferno, it's doubtful whether there's a decent plot anywhere in there, in my opinion. It's a classic book, and it's a great book, and it's very important, but it has a lot of problems. And one of the problems it bothered me since I was a child. I knew you can't take a person who dies, you can't take that person after he's dead and stick him physically in oil and boil him, because he doesn't have a body anymore. So the question about the afterlife to me was always, what is it like to be a spirit? And what you've done here is you've said, okay, these people are in hell, their physicality, and they have the ability to be killed, right?
Many times.
Yes. And so describe how does that happen? Show me how can you be killed multiple times?
They just reform. So I guess it's like, if you think about the resurrection, right? Bodies will be reformed. So all I'm saying in that is, regardless of where you go in the afterlife, your bodies will be reformed. And I'm just saying that if you're in hell and they kill you a lot, then you're just reformed a lot. So all these people that I kill in the book, at least in hell or in any of the other 5 planes, they just come back after a while.
So if there's one place that's worse than a really rough prison in a third world country where people are, in a lot of danger and potentially dying, if there's one thing worse than that, it's the setting of your book.
Oh, yeah.
It's hell, because everybody there is they're a bunch of murderers, and they're generally bad people. Do you have any people who aren't just dead people, who are, is Satan in it? What about lords, other characters who are like demons? Any of that stuff?
I have, I believe I call them devils in that, because depending on, I don't know. I play D&D, so devils are in hell and demons are in whatever, Tartarus or something. They're in a different place.
Oh, okay, I see.
So I refer to them as devils. Yes, so they belong to the plane of hell. That they are citizens, natural born to the plane of hell, whereas humans originate here on Earth, the prime plane, and they moved there after death because of their actions during life. So I do treat them differently. There's a different set of rules for those who are born in hell and those who get transferred to hell.
All right. And do you actually get to meet the devil himself? Is he part of the book at all?
One of them.
He starts the race.
A prince of hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was Druaga.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so he's a prince of hell, and I might have introduced another one. I have all sorts of really crazy, weird, devilish creatures.
And Druaga is a horrible, horrible creature. Worse than a human.
Oh, yeah.
And stronger, more powerful, all kinds of tricks up his sleeve.
Yes.
That kind of character. One of the things I like about it is there's so many different ways that you can set up the world of hell. And The Devil and Max Devlin was a movie that I watched when I was a little kid. It had, is it Bill Cosby? Did I get his name right?
I believe right, yeah.
He's in it, and he does a great job. In fact, well, I don't know if he's the devil or not, but the whole point of it is the character. You can have a setting of hell, and that particular movie shows you the fires of hell. At one point, the protagonist finds himself in the fires of hell, but most of the book is not located or centered in hell itself. In your book, a lot of it, you're portraying a lot of hell. It's maybe half the book or something, I would say.
Okay, I'd say half, right? So what I came up with is something on my own. Now, I did borrow heavily from Dante's Inferno and several other sources, but I developed my own universe for this. And so there's 5 planes. So there's Earth, the mortal plane, right? There is hell, there is purgatory, there is limbo. Sorry, hell. I guess there's 6 planes. Okay, you move on from Earth to one of the 5 planes. So there's, boy, I'm messing this up. So there's hell, there's purgatory, there is limbo, there is paradise, and there is heaven.
All right. And actually, that's the other part of this is your protagonist goes, in fact, that some of the other runners who are in the death race with them go into heaven as part of the final portion of their journey, right?
Correct.
And it turns out that one of those angels in heaven is a sneaky devil. And I say that only because he essentially lets these people be the bad guy in the book keeps acting like himself. He doesn't get redemption. I think his name's Reagan. And he does not get redeemed. Spoiler alert. And so when he's there, he meets the angel, and the angel basically tells him, do unto others as you'd have them do to you. And the way you twist that is that he does bad things to the people around him, and it ends up happening to him instead.
Yep.
There's some things in there that really do show the possibilities that we're dealing with as you've set up this world. And then you have the demons, the devils, and the hell people. And part of what I liked about it, I started to say, is that I like the way that you describe a lot about hell. If you want to have people have pictures of hell, I used to go online all the time and I try to find the best picture of hell, and the stalactites and the stalagmites and the big fires and the flames and the pools of lava and whatever I could find. I just really fascinated by it. And you do a great job of the visual description of hell. One of the best I've ever seen. It'd make a great movie. But that's the part. There's a couple parts or aspects of your book, and one of them is the setting, and the other is the character. Now tell me about Bennett.
Banan.
I'm sorry, Banan. And,
No, that's okay. And the way...
I'm sitting here looking at Bennett Lodge. That's
something
why.
being a bane.
Yes.
So Banan, and it comes from the same kind of root word and everything. And that's what he's meant. That's why I picked that name for him. He is the bane of many people. Right?
Yeah, he's a brutal killer.
Yes.
He starts out as it's like he starts out in Scotland. He starts out
in England.
In England, he's in England, and he marries a Welsh girl, and his opponent comes in and ends up killing, he kills him because he was trying. He was basically a traitor by marrying the Welsh girl.
Right.
That's part of the storyline. So that goes back to 600, whatever it's
800 AD. 800
AD is where Banan starts out, and he is a warlord in his society and rises to he starts out beating up his brothers, right? He has 2 older brothers, and he beats them both up, and then his father kicks him out of the family for doing it and sending him off to war. And that's where he really learns how to be a warrior. Right.
Right. So he has a natural talent for violence. Like
that's a great
He
way
is
to put it.
good at it. Probably one of the best ever. And he grows up in a time where warfare was common and expected. So he, at that point, I mean, is he really evil? You either fight or you die, right? That is the society.
Yes.
So he is just trying to get by in a society that is immersed in violence everywhere. So, and he's good at it. So, like you said, he rises up in the ranks. Well, when he finally dies and goes to hell, he's still good at it. And the princes of hell, like, we want that guy on ours. Like, not only because he's good at violence, But because he still has honor, they can control him. They can make, deals and pacts, and he'll stick to his part of it. So he's very valuable, a very valuable commodity in hell.
Yes. And so that allows him to get into the race. You have to kill 666 people in hell before you get into the race, right?
That's one of the paths. I indicate that it really depends on kind of where your sin is, where your evil is. Now, he's violent. So if it's the path of violence, that's what you got to do. You got to kill 666 people.
Well, I think that the reason he got to hell in the first place, you gave him a favorable twist, because he didn't go there for doing something really bad. He went there for killing a priest. The priest was trying to kill his wife.
He was trying to save his wife.
Yeah.
Right. And that was the trick there. It's like, how do I put someone in this book as the main character who deserves to be in hell, but then the readers are going to go like, I don't know that he deserves to be in hell, right?
Right.
I think most of the readers are going to go like, he was just protecting his wife. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't really... And then they root for him, right? You want to see him win the race because you think that's an injustice for him to be there.
Right. Well, that allows you to develop a story arc in the book. And one of the problems that I had when I wrote Die Today is a story arc. So I was trying to make it about redemption for a man who's committed adultery, then he dies, then is he able to repent in the afterlife? There was a certain church leader who said one time, in fact, it was Spencer W. Kimball, who was the president of the church. He wrote a book called The Miracle of Forgiveness. And he said, don't you dare die before you repent. And that stuck with me. And that was part of the impetus for, so the question of, are you able to be redeemed? That's part of your story arc, and your experience comes through. I mean, your experience as a writer, the many books that you've written, it comes through to tell that story and have a plot and have the setting and the characters. It all comes together beautifully. I really appreciate your book.
Thank you.
It's not easy to write books about the afterlife. I'd just like to bounce a couple other books that by comparison with what you've done.
Okay.
We talked about, we talked about The Gathering and Left Behind. There's a series of books that's fascinating to me, and they're culturally acceptable to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as Mormons, and they would be somewhat unfamiliar in concept to Catholics and Protestants, or people who aren't Christians. And the reason is because of the pre-existence, the premortal life. Pre-existence sounds terrible. Premortal life is probably the better term. But it's the concept in the church that you could be a spirit living with God, and then you get sent down to be immortal on earth. And there's a writer named Chris Stewart, and we talked about him. Yeah. I think he set a record flying around the world in an airplane in the military, and that made him famous. And when he wrote this book, a series of books, he wrote them about the pre-existence, and he also wrote about the end of the world, and it's something that's very similar to what you did in The Gathering. Not similar enough. They're both worth reading, but there's some comparisons there. The first book is about the pre-existence, about a war in heaven where you have Satan and Jesus and God and all the rest of us, and there's this war, and it depicts how this war in heaven happened. Now, you read the book in Revelation, chapter 12, you can get a very nutshell version of that war in heaven. You want to see a great painting, go to the large museums and see the wall-size paintings by, I think it's Raphael, where he's depicting the war in heaven. Those were some of the most beautiful paintings I have ever seen in my life. I don't know if I saw them in Germany, maybe. But those themes of that pre-existence, when we talk about what is your mission, what's your mission in life, or what is your mission in life, part of what we're talking about is where did you come from? And for members of the church, for LDS, we came from a premortal life where we were people and we fought in a war and we were on the side of God. And then we come to earth And our purpose and mission here as mortals is really important to be tested, tried, developed into becoming what we become in the afterlife. So we have these books about the pre-existence, the mortal life, and about the afterlife. The problem with the afterlife is that in the spirit world, we have a hard time trying to explain what it's like to be a spirit and not a mortal. And one of the things that you did, and it's a tool and it's a worldview, and it was very effective, was to have the people in the afterlife have physical bodies, but they have the ability to heal quickly, and if they die, they're going to be brought back because you can't get out of hell.
Right.
So these different books that we could talk about. There's a book called The Lovely Bones. And this is Alice Sebold's book, and it's taught from the standpoint of a 14-year-old girl who is raped and murdered and goes to heaven, and she's describing what's happening with her killer and her family and other events back at her home. And that one has some themes where it's describing what's it really like to be in the afterlife. I'm wondering if you view, suggest to you that your book has some of the elements of fantasy.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
How would you describe that? If we compare the attempt by Alice Sebold to say that this girl is actually in a place and she is able to see from there what's happening with her killer and other people, that's a realistic, potentially realistic view of heaven.
Yeah. So Hellathon is full of creatures that I just invented. I mean, there's devils, if you go to Limbo, I got several wild creatures and cultures that have developed because of the different rules of physics that Limbo represents and everything. So it is definitely a fantasy book just because it has so many of these fantastic creatures that don't exist. Creatures that I don't believe really exist in heaven or hell. All right. So I don't think in the afterlife we will encounter the stuff that I wrote about. So I just made all that up. Sometimes I referenced a little bit like Dante's Inferno to get a few ideas going, but most of it I came up with on my own.
Right, and it was highly entertaining. It was the worldview that you chose. One of the things that the different books that have attempted to show what the afterlife would be like. One is called Passage. It's a novel about a person who's taken ketamine, and eventually ketamine causes you to have a near-death experience. So you've got that one, and there's the one that Robin Williams was in. There was a movie about Robin Williams where his wife dies, and What Dreams May Come.
Okay.
An excellent movie, and very imaginative, and it dealt with some. It was from a novel. I read the novel eventually after I'd seen the movie a bunch of times, and it's a great novel. It talks about a lot of what you would expect to really have happening. How does somebody who's committed suicide deal with it in the afterlife? And Robin Williams' character goes and he's talking to his wife, and he's trying to help her heal sufficiently psychologically so that she can be redeemed and come out of the hellish. So those kinds of things, there's these efforts or attempts to show what the afterlife is really about. What I was trying to do in Die Today was to show, here's what it's really like. Okay. And part of the way I did that was to have people be on this planet after they die, and all of their experiences were here. The problem that I had with plot was the idea that I couldn't have them kill each other. Part of the problem was, how do you have the devils? One of the things that I did more effectively than any other novel I've seen is I showed the character of Satan himself.
Okay.
and I called him Azeloth instead of calling him Satan. But those are some of the things that I've been interested in as when we do future podcasts. Hopefully I can have Randy back and other people that I talk to, the themes for this podcast. I really like looking at the ideas involved in the afterlife. One of them is to do with near-death experiences. A lot of it has to do with Bible teachings about the afterlife, although there's not a lot in some ways. And then to look at different aspects of science as it relates to the afterlife and consciousness. So those are some of the themes that we'll develop. But this really, Randy's book, I really appreciate you being here, because your book gives so much of a feeling to the common ideas about hell, and then I've contrasted those a little bit with the other kinds of books about